Resident Evil Survivor 2, code Veronica, was developed by Capcom and Namco. Originally released into the arcades in June of 2001, it found success here, which gave the developers the green light to port it to the PS2 a few months later, launching in Japan that November and coming to Europe on March 22, 2002. Survivor 2 never came to the US in either its arcade or home console port. The arcade had gone the way of the dodo in the States by the mid-90s, thanks to the rise of the PlayStation and the popularity of console gaming. But the PS2 port? Well, when you consider the sales amount of 119,000, it didn't fill executives with much confidence for success. Now, my history with this game is non-existent. I'd never played it, and following my review of Resident Evil Survivor, I was filled with confidence that it couldn't get worse. Then, I read the comments. This review will detail what works, what doesn't, and ultimately find catharsis in sharing my suffering. Now, if you've been enjoying my content, then put a like on the video and subscribe. It all helps me grow the channel and find a larger audience. But that's enough of that. As usual, this review is split into plot, gameplay, and presentation. Now let's dive in. If you've seen my Resident Evil Survivor review, you've seen me dunk on how cliche an amnesia story is. Well, things don't get better with Survivor 2. In fact, it gets far worse. It's all a dream.
Right.
Turns out that Claire fell asleep in the jet following the end of Code Veronica, and this is the result of that. When you dream, you'll often fuse weird things that at the time feel completely normal, but when you wake up you realise it was all batshit crazy. That's probably the easiest way to explain this game. The plot itself is basically a greatest hits of locations from Code Veronica, with enemies from Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3, but there's nothing linking them. Enemies that shouldn't be there are, and the files which explain the plot try their best to fill in the blanks but ultimately fail due to how nonsensical it all is. There's 5 files across the game, and this is how the story is delivered, and they range from trying to explain why Nemesis is released when an emergency is detected, to a man being in love with a spider, feeding people to it so it grows enormously large, and then waiting to get eaten himself, all while he describes it like some trashy romance novel you see 60-year-old women read. It's a mess. Now, I've got no issue with adapting the story of Code Veronica and telling it in a condensed format, which, actually, would fit the type of game this is. But the thing is, it's not even remotely faithful. It jumps all over the place. Hell, the end boss fight is a tyrant followed by Nemesis. It's not a dream, it's a goddamn nightmare. Resident Evil Survivor 2 was originally an arcade game. Now, you'd expect the logical choice for this would be a light gun game. You know, put it on rails, keep the enemies coming, and blast away till your heart's content. But no. They decided to carve new ground, and to be honest, it's hit and miss. Mostly miss. As I'm sure you've noticed, Survivor 2, much like Survivor, is in first person. You can move your character freely across its environments, and with this freedom of movement, it gives you the ability to find objects across the game, like file pickups, new weapons or treasures, with which, when you collect them all, you get the true ending boss fight against Nemesis. Now, all this worked well enough in the original Survivor, so why change it, right?
Wrong.
Survivor 2 decides to do things differently. Instead of exploring environments and choosing divergent paths to encourage replayability, the game decides to simplify things, focusing on rushing you through as quickly as possible. Upon entering a stage, a timer begins to tick down. So, what's the goal? Collect a key in the environment and take it to a BOW door, beat the boss fight behind it, and congratulations, it's on to the next level. That's it. So, what happens if you don't do it in time? Nemesis breaks out of his containment and chases you. Now, when this first happened, I was actually excited to take him on, and then I realised that he was... You can't kill him. You can't even phase him. He just keeps coming. It's at this point it all clicked. This game is forcing you to move. It wants you to get as efficient at clearing the levels in as low time as possible. This change sacrifices exploration, world building and choice, all for the lowest motivator possible, a better score. It's such a waste. They could have easily put Nemesis in and made it a choice. Do you stand and fight? Potentially using all your heavy hitting weapons to down him, but in return, get a reward, be that a gun part or a more powerful weapon, or do you run and conserve your best weapons for the end of stage boss, giving yourself an easier time? Fight or flight is a choice that's been present in Resident Evil since the original, so choosing to omit it here when it makes the most sense is nothing short of idiotic. Exploration isn't the only change from Survivor to its sequel. You can't aim.
A what?
It's an arcade game ported to home consoles, compatible with a gun con, and you can't move your cursor. In the original Survivor, you'd press L1, pull your gun up and be rooted in place while you line your shots up. Here in Survivor 2, it plays more in line with other FPS games at the time. Think Quake or Doom, except way worse. Why is it worse, I hear you ask? Well, you move slow. Like, super slow. Combine this with enemies that leap across the environment or shoot objects at you, and you've got a gameplay experience which beat me down. Now, I'm not some scrub. I've played games my entire life. I've smashed through games that people call hard without too much effort. But Survivor 2 made me do something I never thought I'd have to do, especially on a Resident Evil game. During arcade mode, you have 3 lives by default, and when they're up,
Game over, man. It's game over.
Now, I attempted normal mode at least 5 times, getting all the way till stage 4 out of 5 before I got slapped into oblivion. I'm sure if I wanted to, I could have embraced the timeless adage of get good, but if it's not clear by now, I wasn't exactly enjoying myself. I didn't feel the urge to suck it up and dive back in for another run. I wanted to get it over with, and the only way to make sure that happened was swallowing my pride and turning it down. Now, I'd love to say something like I breezed it on easy, but in reality, I got slapped. I only just got through the arcade mode. I was on my final life, a few hits from death when the credits wrapped. The sole reason for this difficulty is down to movement. Without being able to quickly strafe away, you see the hits coming from a mile off, but have no option but to tank them. Now, I've been pretty negative so far. There's a lot more to get through, but let's move on to some things the game does right. I stated earlier that this game is built around time completion to achieve a high ranking score, and there's one gameplay system that separates the men from the boys: critical hits. A critical hit occurs when you move right up to an enemy, a quick sound chimes, and light flashes. You have a few frames to fire off a shot which, if successful, will instantly kill the enemy and score you double points. You essentially put yourself in harm's way to save time and rack up an even bigger score. It's a brilliant addition. If you were really wanting to top the leaderboard, you'd have to master this. And for as much as scores don't motivate me in this game, there is something really satisfying about pulling off multiple criticals in a row. Upon starting any of Survivor 2's modes, you choose a character. Now, to start with, you have access to Claire Redfield and Steve Burnside. They each have their own arsenal you can find across the environment, and for as similar as they are to play, this variation in unique weapons, especially the starter guns, goes a long way to add some level of variety to the experience. Usually choosing between Claire and Steve is only going to go one way.
Relax, beautiful. I said I was sorry.
But here, there's no voice acting. So in a weird turn of events, Steve became my favourite character to play as. His golden dual Lugers fires slower, but he has 2 of them. And to be honest, I've always wanted to steal those guns off his mutated ass in Code Veronica, so finally getting the chance to blast away like an 80s pimp made me really smile. Didn't last long though, because I played dungeon mode. Survivor 2 has 2 main modes: arcade, which is what I've been talking about this entire review, and dungeon mode. Dungeon mode gives you a huge area made up of multiple rooms which you progress through, trying to build a combo to increase your score. The combo meter fills up by killing enemies, destroying crates, or really just shooting anything that breaks. And this works well enough. However, it has a fatal flaw: there's no map. As I'm sure you noticed, in arcade mode you get a map on the right side of the screen to help you orient yourself, to keep focused on the goal at hand. Dungeon mode, omitting this handy feature, means you end up continually going in circles. Adding to this frustration is every door and corridor look identical. As much as I love door transitions, this mode put it to the test. I literally rage quitted after my 10th visit to the same room and never went back. What were they thinking? Graphically, Survivor 2 looks identical to Code Veronica. The models on Claire and Steve look good enough. But just like Survivor 1, seeing the environments this close certainly ages them. Survivor 2 visually does the job, but it's certainly nothing to praise. Now, one thing I do want to pay special attention to is the end of level door. So on the nose, I love it. Now, without any voice acting, it's impossible to critique any performances here, but with how bad Code Veronica was in this department, it's probably to the game's benefit. Survivor 2 has a very limited number of cutscenes, enough to move the plot onwards, but they don't amount to more than a few minutes combined. There's very little animation on offer to give any sort of critique here, but one choice I hated more than anything is how the files are presented. Typically, Resident Evil files are solid text documents you can scroll through as quickly as you want to, moving the pages back and forth to reread or skip entirely. Here, the 5 files scroll on their own, and it's so painfully slow, it's near torture. The only saving grace is the music accompanying the files. It's the best music in the game hands down. Now, I have zero idea why these tracks weren't included in the arcade mode. They are actually incredible. The score that accompanies you throughout the 5 stages of arcade mode is there? I honestly can't tell you anything about it. It's super forgettable. Survivor 2 takes the few good things about Survivor 1 and throws them aside, focusing it more on time-focused arcade gameplay. But unfortunately, in doing so, it further degrades the experience. At 40 minutes long, this game should have never been sold to anybody. It was a waste of money on release, and today, it's a waste of your time. It offers nothing to the series or the game that it's adapted from. It's actually insulting how dumb this game is. It's lazy, it's pointless, and ultimately, it somehow takes the crown for the worst Resident Evil game that I've ever experienced. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then put a like on it and tell me your thoughts on Survivor 2 in the comments below. I love hearing your experiences with the games that I cover, and I try to respond to everyone, so let's discuss it. Up next is Resident Evil Gaiden before I dive into Dead Aim, so don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an upload. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, see ya.